So my name is Rebecca Fitzhugh, and I'm the head of technical advocacy at Rubrik. And this includes our solutions architecture teams as well as our developer relations teams that I am responsible for. And so I'm VCDX number 243.
Awesome. So how was it getting your VCDX?
You know, it's you take the good with the bad. I think it's a great learning experience, but it's an arduous journey, right? So it's not intended to be easy.
And what made you decide to pursue the certification in the first place?
To be honest, it just seemed like the next logical step. I had achieved my VCAP certifications, and to be honest, my career is actually starting to take me out of the VMware ecosystem. And I really kind of wanted that last feather in the cap, if you will, or that last kind of punctuation mark on my VMware resume before I really started diverging into new paths.
What would you say is the biggest challenge in getting your certification, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think when I went through it, I think the hardest thing for me to understand was just really what was expected. You do have a blueprint, but it is written kind of conceptually, right? There's a lot left to kind of the gray area. And so the hard part for me was really deciphering what was expected of me as a candidate. And so really kind of building a strong network with other folks who are pursuing that certification was very beneficial to me in my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So who was involved in that? Who did you reach out to, and how did you find that community?
Yeah, so I did my VCDX with a partner. So shout out to Brett Garino, number 256. Somehow I remember his number, but not my own sometimes. I think it's because his is like the power of two, right? He's got like the perfect VCDX number. But I co-wrote and worked on it with Brett. And luckily for me, Brett is the far more extroverted, social one of the two of us, because if it was up to me, I would have just been locked in my office and never talked to another human being while working on it. And so Brett really was a very big part of that journey for obvious reasons, but he also helped nurture a nice community around us and partnered us with a lot of other folks who were pursuing the same certification at the same time. And so a lot of that came from Greg Robertson's VCDX study group and meeting folks there, as well as just through Twitter and seeing other people that were going through that same journey.
Do you think it would have been significantly different if you had done it alone?
I think it would have been significantly less fun. But I do think it would have been different. I think having a study group was extremely beneficial to me. As much as I do like working in solitude, I also get a lot out of like a Socratic method in which you kind of come out and you present your ideas, and then the role of my study group was really to tear those ideas apart and to tell me what areas were weak. And so that way I could kind of go back into my office and brainstorm and work on it and continue to iterate and improve my design. And so that was a really integral part of the process for me.
How long did the design take for you?
If we're only factoring in writing time and not all of the prerequisite certifications, I think it probably took Brett and I probably 4 or 5 months in total. But I'll be honest, we also kind of spread that out over maybe an 18 or 24-month period of us kind of starting and stopping. And then finally we had that talk of, are we doing this? Or are we just going to keep not doing this? And so after having that very frank conversation between the two of us, we really sat down and kind of cranked out the remainder of the design pretty quickly.
So how did life change after getting the certification?
Didn't. I mean, it's, there was no ground. Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. I don't want to diminish the achievement. But then you wake up the next day and you're a consulting architect, right? Or you're still a pre-sales engineer or whatever role that you're in, and you just kind of go back to work. So I think more than anything, it's a validation for yourself of the skill sets that you earn, and also that journey, right? The skills that you're really fine-tuning and honing along that way.
So if you could give a piece of advice to someone starting out on that journey, what would you say to them?
I would give them 2 pieces of advice. I would first say, don't overthink it, which is probably some advice I could have taken at that time. But, as vague as the blueprint may seem, as vague as sort of this journey may seem, the details are there. You just have to look at it with that kind of right lens at the right time. So don't overthink it. You're there for a reason. And then secondly, I would say focus on your methodology. Really understand how you are grabbing these inputs, how you're working with these key stakeholders and turning that information into a conceptual model that then feeds into your logical design decisions and later your physical attributes, right? So if you really have a strong process and a strong methodology, the rest of it fills itself out for you.
Coming back to VMware, what would you say is your favorite VMware product? Where do you like working the most?
Whew, this might be a point of contention for some, but I'm going to have to always say vCloud Director. vCloud Director, I worked with VMware for a few years, but I think vCloud Director, I really saw how powerful that platform was and really what it could be. And so I've been really excited actually the last few years to see the journey that it's taken. And now we see this as, a service that's being offered through VMware Cloud. So I think it's really come a long way and I'm impressed by it.
And what kind of projects do you enjoy working on the most?
Currently, I write a lot of code actually. So I really, these days I don't really do too much with the VMware ecosystem in full transparency, but we still run a lot of our infrastructure on VMware and it is still a part of my daily life. I just tend to not, it's more of there and I'm consuming its resources, if you will, than actually doing any kind of day-to-day management or architecture around it. So with my team, we do write a lot of software development kits as well as API integration. So I actually spend a lot of time writing, reviewing code, designing software, things like that.
And in that whole ecosystem, what would you say is the coolest innovation that you've come across recently?
Probably the thing that I've been most excited to start working with and continue to work with over the past few months has been GraphQL. So it's a new type of API service. So folks who use VMware products, you might be very well aware of REST APIs and the REST endpoints that are available with VMware platforms. And we're starting to see sort of the next evolution of what an API architecture can look like. And that's where GraphQL is really coming in. And so for where I work, we actually use GraphQL as a part of our SaaS platform rather than REST. And so we're starting to see a lot of efficiency around how we can fetch data out of these platforms. And I think that's been a really fun project for me and my team.
Sounds interesting. So what do you think will happen in the industry in the next 5 years?
So I think we're going to continue to see more infrastructure as code principles be adopted across the data center as well as the public cloud. And I definitely think that it will become the de facto standard as people provision resources and manage that IaaS and PaaS layer in their cloud service provider. And we've already seen a lot of the proliferation of REST APIs in the data center. And I think that's going to continue. And what we're going to move away from is sort of the bespoke, handcrafted infrastructure and more to really codifying that and provisioning that with CI.
When it comes to certification, how important do you think that is for someone in their career or their journey?
I will say you'll never get paid less for having a certification, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get paid more, but you're certainly never going to be discounted by having it. So I think certification is always a very good study mechanism. It's always a very good validation for yourself and your employer. But I think it really depends on the role that you're in all honesty. But I do always see the value in certification. It's something that I've pursued myself and I'll continue to pursue. But I think really the importance lies in the education that you're gaining as a part of that certification process.
Great. Thanks so much. Is there anything else you want to share with us today? Anything exciting that you're working on?
Nothing I can talk about right now, unfortunately. I'm working on a lot of fun stuff, so just keep your eyes out, I guess.
Top secret.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.